This is your daily dose of all things royal.
The reason why the Labour Party, the Democrat Party in the UK, the reason why they're able to stay in power is because they'll tell these Muslims they can go ahead, do whatever they want. A Muslim actually should be more conservative than they would be a liberal because they don't stand for a lot of that progressive stuff. They're not pro-LGBTQ+, they're pro-family, right? And so he goes, well, it doesn't matter to them because they have Sharia law. So that's above anything. And so if somebody goes to that mosque where 1,000 people go, they tell the mosque leader, we're going to let you guys do whatever you want. Just make sure you guys vote for us. So then when it comes day to vote, the leader of the mosque, everyone in the mosque will then go to the voting centers and go vote for that candidate. That's why in London, the mayor's Muslim, a lot of the towns around it are Muslim as well, and they actually have courts that are practicing Sharia law. And so I kind of knew that was going to happen inside of America as well.
Well. Would anyone really be shocked if we were to find out these two shysters got tangled up in their own little Minnesota-style fraud scheme? Buckle in, because what I've got for you today is kind of wild. Yeah, this is going to be one of those videos where you'll never look at charities the same way again. So grab a cold one, get comfortable, and let's dive into this. One thing I've consistently observed about Harry and Meghan is that timing is everything for them. When they release information or make strategic moves, it's rarely a random thing. It's always deliberate, coordinated, and designed to serve a specific purpose. This could mean overshadowing William and Catherine, diverting attention, or countering narratives they can't fully control or want out there. Which brings me now to the recent developments with Archewell. James Holt's announcement back on December 29th that he's stepping down as executive director and returning to the UK, combined with the recent Archewell financials and the wiping, or I would like to say major overhaul, of the Archewell website, now rebranding from the Archewell Fugazi Public Charity Foundation to Archewell Philanthropies. These events unfolded right around late December 2025, coinciding precisely with the escalation and exposure of the major Minnesota fraud scandal involving systemic misuse and federal funds through nonprofit NGOs and daycare networks. If you're not familiar or need a quick summary of what went down, independent journalist Nick Shirley went viral exposing the Minnesota fraud, which gained massive attention in late 2025 into early 2026, where he uncovered and brought to mainstream this large-scale scheme where millions in federal benefits, particularly child care assistance, appeared to be siphoned off through fraudulent nonprofit operations and related entities. His latest expose on the Minnesota fraud scandal really had me thinking. This isn't limited to Minnesota or even just a problem that is isolated here in the United States with similar networks. Exploiting nonprofits, lax oversight, and government-funded programs for massive fraud have appeared in various forms within global NGO networks, raising serious questions now about charitable structures worldwide. And I'm talking about the West, in the UK, in Canada, Australia, the EU. It seems like they're all doing the same thing. The timing of all of this, on top of all the propaganda about Harry's security and forcing the hand, essentially, of the Home Office to give him back his status, which would entail a level of immunity, feels far from coincidental, especially given the scrutiny Archewell has faced over its finances, staffing changes, and restructuring in the same period. And let's not forget Harry's interference with our 2020 election, as well as censoring Americans. Again, they're up to their necks in it. These moves seem carefully timed to manage the various narratives amid rising questions about not only the nonprofit, but also the other stuff that's going on. So it had me thinking, and it dawned on me. Is the real reason for James Holt running back like a little bitch is to avoid the fallout that seems inevitable with the FBI now looking seriously into these NGOs? My gut instinct is telling me it is. So how did this fraud get so out of control? Well, we're going to have to start at the beginning with the big one that kicked everything off, which was the Feeding Our Future case.
Right now, the now convicted ringleader of what prosecutors called the country's largest pandemic fraud case and her co-defendant spending their first night in jail. Their mugshots just into our newsroom in the last 2 hours. Today, a jury found the pair guilty on all counts against them after about just 5 hours of deliberation.
Okay, let's go back to 2020 for a minute. COVID hits hard. Schools shut down, kids aren't getting free meals at school anymore, and the federal government steps in with emergency rules to make sure children in low-income families get fed. So they relaxed a bunch of normal requirements, like no more strict checks on every meal, sites don't actually have to be schools, and just send out grab-and-go food. The goal of all of this, it was really to get help out fast to families who needed it. In Minnesota, a nonprofit called Feeding Our Future jumps in to save the day. Founded by a woman named Amy Bach, seen here in this photo, partners with hundreds of local spots, restaurants, grocery stores, community groups, to claim they're handing out millions of meals to kids who need them, especially in poor and minority neighborhoods. Sounds great, right? Just like Archwell. Instead of actually providing all those meals, the group starts pumping out fake paperwork. They claim way more meals than ever existed, millions upon millions. They fake lists of kids' names and ages, make up attendance sheets, forge invoices from suppliers who never delivered food. The state and federal government, through the USDA and Minnesota Department of Education, paid out reimbursements based on those claims. Now, Feeding Our Future then goes ahead and took a cut as an admin fee and allegedly kicked back money to the site operators who were in on it. The cash flows now in huge, massive amounts. So what started out as a few $1 million pre-pandemic explodes to nearly $200 million in just 2021, totaling around $250 million that was stolen. And where did the money go? Well, it sure didn't go for kids. It went towards buying luxury cars, mansions, fancy jewelry, trips overseas, high-end real estate. People living large on money meant for hungry children. Shameful. Absolutely shameful. So by 2022, the FBI raids offices, charges start flying, over 75 people in total. Many people pleading guilty, including Bach herself, who got convicted. Little did we know that this was just the beginning. Investigators kept digging and found the same playbook popping up in other state programs, especially Medicaid-funded ones, government health aid for vulnerable people. Now, across these programs, the tactics were similar. Inflated bills, services never delivered, networks of people splitting the cash. And because of pandemic relaxations, plus some weak oversight, like agencies under pressure to approve claims quickly, or even lawsuits that scared off investigations, the money poured out unchecked.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hudson, who is Salim Saeed and Amy Bach?
I recognize those names as defendants in the Feeding Our Future trial.
They ran Feeding Our Future, is that right?
That's correct.
And they've been indicted?
That's correct.
They've been convicted?
That's correct.
And they're in jail waiting sentences, is that right?
As I understand it.
Okay, I want to go back, because earlier with Mr. Gill, you said that they overlooked the fraud. I think it's worse than that. I think they helped it along. I'm going to go to this meeting that took place, or actually I want to go to March 30th, 2021. Is it true back in March of 2021, the Minnesota Department of Education suspended payments to Feeding Our Future, that program? Is that right?
I believe that's correct.
And then a month later, they resumed payments.
That's correct.
What caused them to change their mind?
In my opinion, what caused them to change their mind was pushback from their constituency within the Somali community who accused the state agencies of being racist.
But what caused them to stop it in the first place? Was it whistleblowers coming forward? Was it like this something's not right here? What happened?
apologize for the misunderstanding. The reason they stopped the funds in the first place is because they had credible allegations that there was fraud taking place.
From whistleblowers and others.
Correct.
And just they're doing their job looking, this doesn't make sense. We got all these programs, no one's getting fed, and yet money's going out the door like crazy. So they suspended it. And then they started it back up, right? Was there any threat of a lawsuit from the Somali community and folks affiliated with Feeding Our Future?
Mr. Jordan, there was more than a threat. They actually did it.
They did? And what was the alleged claim in that lawsuit?
That they were victims of racial discrimination.
Oh, they played the race card, huh? All this fraud going on, money going out, and they played the race card. Now, when I talked about not just overlooking it, there was a meeting that took place between the Attorney General and affiliates of Feeding Our Future. Is that right?
That is correct.
And what happened at that meeting? Do we know?
Yeah, we do, because we have it on tape. There was an audio recording made at that meeting that was entered into evidence in the Feeding Our Future trial, and it was later revealed through work from Center of the American Experiment, the full recording. And my observations of what took place in that meeting was that Attorney General Keith Ellison was focused on one thing and one thing only, and that was keeping these folks in business. There were no questions that he asked of these folks about how the kids are doing, the operation, how they're getting fed, who's being helped. Instead, the focus was entirely on ensuring that the money continues to flow. And I'll add that he went so far as to say that he was going to fight these people in reference to the state agencies. The state agencies are his client.
Yeah. And when you said money's going to flow, did money flow to Mr. Ellison's campaign a couple weeks later from some of the folks who were in that meeting?
Sure did.
How much? Do we know how much that was?
I do not have that number.
So it wasn't just overlooking the fraud. They were actively trying to make sure this program continued, and then they benefited from that politically with contribution to their campaign, all in this same year, all in 2021, when this was all coming to a head. Is that accurate?
That is my understanding.
And this fraud is much bigger than this, because as I look, it's like 6 different federal agencies. Department of Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, Small Business Association, Housing Urban Development, Department of Labor, Department of Agriculture. In this program and a bunch of others, they were shaking down the entire federal government, it looked like. 6 different federal agencies. I think you pointed out, over the last 15 years.
That's correct.
And not only are the Democrat administration overlooking it, they're helping it along. They're assisting it. They're going after whistleblowers, as your colleague pointed out. And they're benefiting from all this politically with contribution to their campaign, not to mention the voting issue that you referenced earlier as well. Is that all accurate?
I believe so.
Oh, now there's more than 6 agencies involved. There's 6 federal agencies that got shaken down, but there's 2 other agencies involved now, the FBI and the DOJ.
A lot of the people charged come from the Minnesota's Somali American community, which has made this a political firestorm. Debates about immigration, oversight failures, pointing the fingers at each other, and program design. But the real core issue here? It was the generous aid programs rolled out fast during a crisis without strong enough checks to stop bad actors from exploiting them on a massive scale. And the sad part about this is that they were taking money that was for kids as well as vulnerable people, like people with disabilities. Like, take, for example, the housing stabilization services. What they were doing was the providers would bill hundreds of dollars a day per person for so-called quote-unquote support. But in many of those cases, they just rent a place, drop someone there, provide little or no real help, and keep billing like crazy. Some operators even came from out of state because Minnesota's rules made it easy pickings to scam off of the taxpayer. Then they had the autism that blew up and behavioral therapy for kids. Companies claim they're giving one-on-one therapy, but they hire unqualified people like teenagers with zero training. They fake the records and then sometimes even pay parents kickbacks to sign their kids up. Personal care assistants, home health services, same story. Bill for help that never happens. Fake clients, shell companies, kickbacks to recruit people. And when you understand this model, I think it's only natural for Doria's shell company, Loving Kindness Senior Care, to come to mind. This sounds like exactly what is going on here, but that's just my opinion. This website literally hasn't been changed since 2020. Very basic. And it's just a bunch of services that could easily be contracted as a third party with a healthcare provider, of which then the healthcare provider turns around and submits their inflated receipts to the US government. My God, if this is what is going on, I'm telling you, arrests need to be made immediately. Like, you really can't trust these people. Seriously. And I'm pretty sure the apple does not fall far from the tree. So let's go ahead and turn to Archewell Fugazi Public Charity's so-called Welcome Project. You know, that program that Meghan thought that she was quite genius in coming up with. Now, this is the program that spun off of the Operation Allies Welcome and Welcome US coalition. And what I'm about to describe here is just my observation and speculation based on the patterns we've already seen in major nonprofit fraud cases, especially this Minnesota one. When you look back at how much money was immediately greenlit and thrown at for this chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan, parallels with what happened with COVID are impossible to ignore. Yeah, I've talked about the Welcome Project in detail before, the players involved, the shady network of nonprofits, and how all of this ties into the rush to resettle Afghans in America with remarkably little scrutiny. In analyzing this over the last several days, it follows the exact same pattern we saw with this Feeding of Our Future scandal, and also with COVID relief programs. Massive piles of taxpayer money handed out at speed with minimal oversight, and a whole lot of trust placed in politically connected nonprofits. So Meghan stated the mission was to help resettled women, starting with Afghans and then later expanding to women from other countries, and rightfully so because Operation Allies Welcome funding ran out. So, she had to expand the horizon and go find other pools of money to go grift off of. All of this is wrapped in glossy, meaningless word salad about building community in the United States and Canada. If you haven't noticed, that kind of vague, feel-good language is not accidental. It's done purposely because it's perfect cover, because words like community and belonging are things no auditor can ever truly measure. So now you understand why they're always banging on about mental health, mental health, mental health. It's nothing tangible. It's nothing that can be really measured. So on paper, the Welcome Project allegedly supports women-led groups, job coaching, mental health discussions, and community events. Archewell partnered with other organizations like the New American Association of Massachusetts, Mosaic, Mina's List. But when you actually look at Archewell's reporting, there's almost nothing concrete about what was actually done. They boast about expanding across 14 locations, yet provide virtually no detail about outcomes. I mean, sure, they add a couple statistics in this report, but it does not corroborate with the partner that they allegedly worked with in their report. Like, where is the actual study that was done? You can't just throw up a couple numbers and call it a day, because that's essentially what we're seeing here with this. And then chances are going back to the government and billing it as research and getting paid millions of dollars for it. Like, when you look at the 990 for this organization that Archewell partnered with, their whole business is contracting services. And those services could very well have come from Archewell. But you can't see that here on the 990s because there's only so much transparency that we get from them. So yeah, this foundation for social connection that has been working with Archewell for the past 2 years to crank out a couple statistics is like the same socialist bullshit. The summary that briefly describes this organization's mission is to advance social connection nationwide, rooted in evidence for our collective well-being. You would think Meghan wrote that. Meghan has completely destroyed two words for me: community and collective. I shiver every time I hear the word collective because that is communism. They are driving and pushing communism here. And they're doing it as they steal our money. I mean, seriously, this is death by welfare. And it's all starting to make sense now, because last year I did this video about Archewell's latest event with the Welcome Project, and I just was perplexed as to, How this was considered an event, that somehow funds were being exchanged for this group to just go walking in a free park. Literally. This is what I said at the time. By now, as we've all come to learn, anything that Harry and Meghan say, touch, and do has a level of manipulation, and this write-up that was done is no exception. In the part where they say this welcome project has also ensured that the physical activities are accessible for all through All Terrain Georgia, Refugee Women's Network was able to provide an action track wheelchair. So when you're looking at this photo, you're thinking, wow, they funded and helped this woman be able to have this action track wheelchair that possibly belongs to the Refugee Women's Network in order to enjoy this activity with everyone else. Well, that's not the true story. I mean, if you read it on the surface and don't think about it, you think, wow, yeah, they are adding some value here. But guess what, folks? This accommodation is free, okay? It is a free service that is run by another nonprofit organization that helps people enjoy in general, not just excluding minorities and refugees and really discriminating against everyone else, Meghan. It's a free service provided by donations as well as funding from the Georgia government. So for them to say, oh, we're making it accessible for them to be able to hike. Okay, maybe they have connected people together and got this certification so they can learn and understand how to ride one of these mobilized wheelchairs, but they're not contributing any money to it. In fact, the most ridiculous thing in the taxpayer funding this hiking group is that all of this stuff that they are doing here is free. Going out to a public park and walking around. Sure, maybe they have costs for these little sticks to walk around with. How much do those sticks really cost? I count 6 in this picture. I mean, come on, man. Low end, you could get one of these sticks for $20. So we could assume 6 of those, if let's say this group provided them, cost them $120, $200 at best, okay? But other than that, there's no t-shirts, there's no water, there's no food, they're not providing sneakers or hiking gear. What is it that they're paying for? What is it that they're taking taxpayer money to do? This wasn't humanitarian work. That was a photo shoot dressed up as so-called impact. So now here is where it gets really interesting. Several of Archwell's partners, like Upwardly Global and Action Opportunity Fund, are already raking in millions of dollars in government funding, whether it be indirectly or directly. So when celebrities keep saying they, quote unquote, partnered with organizations that are already swimming in taxpayer cash, that's not philanthropy. That's grifting in the highest form, whether it be for clout, branding, or something more darker, like what happened in Minnesota. Those nonprofits pretended to feed children or provide services that never actually existed. They inflated the numbers, they fabricated records, and siphoned off public money to buy luxury homes, cars, and some of them overseas homes. So when Meghan and Harry constantly highlight their property in Portugal, it's hard not to see a pattern, right? I see a possible blueprint that Harry and Meghan are following, where inflated refugee services across multiple locations could quietly funnel government aid into their private companies. And notice the kinds of programs they emphasize. It's mental health, it's emotional well-being, it's showing up and doing good, but not really defining what the good is. The sense of belonging and community. Again, all noble and nice sounding, but impossible to audit. You can't count feelings on a balance sheet, which makes them ideal in this grift. So let's go ahead and talk about how this would actually work, if indeed I am right and this is what they're doing. I have discussed before, I believe in the review of Archwell's latest tax return, talking about how these NGOs on the front end would show a certain number, but on the back end, whether it be through their shell companies, be raking in the dough. But now we're going to add in the layer of man-made crisis and having people so scattered that they're reckless with throwing away our money. So when we look at this, first, in this scenario, the government spigot, Operation Allies Welcome, involved billions of federal dollars for Afghan resettlement. In a rush, normal checks and balances were definitely loosened, just like during COVID. Speed was prioritized over accountability, which is always when corruption flourishes. We already saw how hospitals and other institutions inflated claims during the pandemic. The same incentive structure exists here. Archwell claimed that in 2023, the Welcome Project worked with 237 Afghan women. But there is no independent verification of that number. It could be accurate, it could be selective, or completely made up. We have no way of knowing. Meanwhile, Meghan's public appearances with refugees were tightly controlled photo ops, often featuring the same small group of women again and again. It looked good on camera, but tells us nothing about what actually happened behind the scenes, right? There's the money trail. In a worst-case scenario, partner organizations could submit inflated or bogus invoices for things like facilitators, supplies, or consultants, with that money flowing to shell companies owned directly or indirectly by people like Harry and Meghan. We've long questioned the web of companies tied to Harry and her family, including what I've mentioned earlier in this video, Doria Ragland's Loving Kindness Senior Care Management, which, in theory, could serve as a conduit for kickbacks. And what we see on paper, Archwell's 990 tax returns would still look clean, somewhat honest, showing legitimate grants going out. But if fraud was occurring, which I feel it is, those grants could simply be the front, a cover for cycling money back through private entities and washing those taxpayer dollars. So now it all makes sense as to why you see all these little denominations being thrown out in grants to these various organizations that are raking in millions of dollars. It's really to wash our money. Yeah, when you look at this, those small grants, they function like a key. They help partners justify access or legitimize much larger piles of government money. And once that happens, Archwell's money gets blended right in with taxpayer funds, making it far harder to track what came from where. This is the laundering process. Every NGO does it. And that's why now when you look at these NGOs and you see these small denominations like 15,000, 5,000, especially coming from Harry and Meghan, who are millionaires, it now starts to make sense. This is not about showing up and doing good and really impacting the world. This is about washing money. Now, so this is what Feeding Our Future, that was operated in Minnesota, had been doing. They were mixing federal reimbursements with their own funds to hide their fraud in plain sight. Now, consider the scale, right? In Minnesota, the fraud reached hundreds of millions of dollars. In the post-Afghanistan era, where refugee spending hit the billions, I think it was like almost 10 billion for 80,000 people, the potential exposure could easily reach tens of millions nationwide, and God only knows how much money Harry and Meghan siphoned in. This year, Archwell's own filings show rising program expenses, yet the tangible results remain maddeningly vague. Showing up to do good does take on a whole new meaning when you realize they might really be showing up to move money around. And you're probably asking, why hasn't this been exposed? Well, I think it's because refugee programs exploded after 2021 under emergency waivers similar to COVID. It also has to do with people paying attention. You know, I was the first one who called out this fraud with Archwell since 2021. Nobody else was talking about this and nobody else was paying attention to what I was saying. But fast forward here, and now people are realizing that this whole thing has been a grift. Harry and Meghan are the biggest royal grift that exists. And now you can understand why this channel is named the Royal Grift. There was so much theft going on during the Biden regime. And it's not only going to be about daycare centers or Medicaid. We're also going to see this when it comes time to do an audit around the whole illegal invasion that we funded and paid for. What these fucking globalist leaders have done to us is so gross. And as I said in the beginning of this video, it's not just the United States where this is happening. Citizens are getting screwed in the UK, the EU, Canada, Australia, because they're all following the same playbook. And the problem that we have now is that there are a lot of people who, even though they know that this is wrong, still want it to continue. Hence the reason why we're seeing all these protests and pushback in Minnesota and painting Donald Trump as like the evil dictator. These are the people that want to continue to keep grifting and stealing from hardworking, tax-paying citizens because they feel entitled to do so. The problem that we see with these radical leftists is that they have no moral compass to understand what's right and what's wrong. And I always go back to my faith. It's Christianity that grounds me. I'm not telling you what to believe, but if you don't believe that there's a higher power out there and you believe that this is all you have, then you can justify why you're being an asshole, right? If it's your world and we're just living in it, then that's a problem. That's a real problem. And that's what we see with Harry and Meghan, or people like Harry and Meghan, because it's not just Harry and Meghan that act like this. I mean, it's a really bizarre phenomenon that we are witnessing with these psychotic leftist lunatics. These politicians that are in charge don't give a shit. And make no mistake, they are at fault for this. Aggressive scrutiny of refugee programs can be framed as anti-immigrant or politically motivated, which chills investigations, as we saw with this Minnesota fraud. And not to belabor this, but look at the partners again. The International Rescue Committee has pulled in over $430 million in federal grants since 2021. The other partner, Upwardly Global, secured at least $2.2 million from HHS's Office of Refugee Resettlement for job training. Then you have Women for Afghan Women. That's tied into massive humanitarian funding that's doing God knows what. Like, I was looking at this database last night and I was infuriated of the fraud, waste, and abuse, and even uncovered a couple of these so-called organizations that's receiving government money and not reporting it. So to summarize this up, all of this operates in sectors. We've got childcare, mental health, housing, social services that rely on this pay first and audit later reimbursement model. That model has been exploited repeatedly. It's been abused repeatedly. It now makes sense as to why Archwell Fugazi Public Philanthropies is now moving over to this fiscal sponsorship model. Not because they want to do this as a family. This is because they want to be the legal recipient of funds. And what this means is that if they are the official recipient of a federal, state, or local grant or contract, then they can submit the invoices or reimbursement claims to the government because they are the legal grantee. But here's the thing, Harry and Meghan have been operating this way the whole entire time. So just saying that they're moving over to this fiscal sponsorship model is nothing new. They've been doing this the entire time. But now, if they do apply for grants and they receive these grants from the federal government, they will then have the ability to get reimbursed and inflate these numbers, which I don't doubt that they will do. My guess is the reason why we don't see any federal grants going directly to Archwell is because they're fairly new and they were getting into this whole network. But what I can see happening, especially with all the propaganda coming out about Harry and Meghan thinking about going back to the UK and blah, 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 is that if indeed Harry does get his IPP status, then there may be a couple grants thrown his way for trading whatever it be, information or proximity to the royal family. The Democrats are not going to let this guy go so easily. But I wouldn't worry about it too much because I don't see it getting to that point. Trust me, there are people looking at Archwell. And now with all of this, yeah, fat chance, Meghan. Yeah, I think this is what's going on here. This welcome project, I think Meghan had visions of expanding to many locations across the nation and then billing back for services, just like what Minnesota had been doing. But that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content, but until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you later. Bye!
Such a fraud.